Everybody, as you get ready for something like this, is going to focus in on one player, and because of the history, and make this game about that one player facing his former team. Of course, it's not about that, but in terms of what Aaron is dealing with this week and all of the bombardment that he's getting from all sides, is it hard for him, do you think, to kind of shut that out and concentrate specifically on just a game?
I'm sure it is much easier for him than many of us would imagine. But I'm sure that's the case for a lot of things over the course of his career. You don't stumble into 20 plus years of service in this league at the level that he's done it on accident. And so certainly it's a unique week, but certainly I feel like he's uniquely equipped to deal with it. And I'm sure he's going to minimize it in every way that he possibly can. In terms of shielding others. And he's just been in so many moments that are probably unique and interesting that is probably not registering on his radar in the ways that we would imagine.
In some ways, looking from the outside, it feels different this year with this team, with him as your quarterback. Is it because of the fact that he has the experience we're talking about, because of the fact that he's accomplished so much, whether he's the MVP Aaron Rodgers or not, or whether he's the 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers? It feels like that there's a kind of a center there in terms of what your team is offensively.
I just think he's at an awesome place in his career, man. He's playing football for all the right reasons, man. He's got a love affair with this game. He's at the point in his career where he wants to give back to the game and the young men that play it. I think he's uniquely patient with young players and kind of plays in that spirit. And I think that those are some of the reasons why you feel maybe what you feel. I just think he certainly has a unique resume and unique talents, but I also think that he came here with some real pure intentions that you feel in a lot of ways.
People asked you leading up to this game, is Micah Parsons somebody that you game plan for? And it's an obvious yes. The question is, how do you game plan for somebody who has the ability to be that disruptive from so many different places?
Thankfully, man, we have a lot of experience in dealing with the likes of Myles Garrett. They're certainly different players, but they impact the game in similar ways. They're both edge specialists. They both move around schematically. You can't nail them down in one specific spot. They both are bombs capable of going off in your venue and really changing the trajectory of a game. And so, we're just approaching this week with that frame of reference. He is a special player. He is a dynamic edge player. In one-dimensional passing circumstances, he's certainly capable of changing the climate in the venue. We respect that, but we also know we better minimize the amount that we're in those one-dimensional circumstances. And so for us, we don't see him obviously a lot, but we go through the process of readying ourselves for a guy with that type of a magnitude. And we got a guy on our team, obviously, that's capable of doing the same things to a training camp practice and so forth. To be quite honest with you, it's everyday procedure for our first team offense in a training camp like setting when we're going ones-on-ones, because he'll destroy a practice if you let him, talking about TJ Watt.
TJ and the defense probably not where you would want them necessarily to be in the early part of the season. And I've talked with coaches over the years that have a perspective, and they talk about how teams evolve over the course of the season. I think in a lot of ways, we as the media or fans think, well, this is what it is, and this is what they are and what they're going to be. Vic Fangio last year telling me how his team, his defense evolved over the course of the season. Is that what's happening here?
I certainly believe that. It certainly needs to be that. We haven't gotten off to the type of start that we would have anticipated or wanted. But I've been in this business long enough that I'm not shocked by that. I understand that it is a process. We have some guys who have experience, but they're not experienced with us. And so a lot of them are new in the secondary in particular. And so that's a process. You have to cook that. Coupled with the lack of availability of some of those guys at the early portions of this thing, it's probably slowed some of that. And so we're just going to keep our head down and keep working every day and understand that if we do so diligently, it's going to start looking more like we like it more consistently.
I've talked with a lot of your players over the years. I talked with Nick Herbig a couple weeks ago about your approach to coaching. And to a man, they all say in a lot of ways that you're a player's coach. And sometimes that label gets a bad rap. How do you manage to figure out a way to be a player's coach and still stress the discipline and accountability that you do in that locker room?
Because I think I'm probably mislabeled, and I think a lot of guys like me are mislabeled. We're player advocates. I do what's best for players, not necessarily what players want. Sometimes and many times they're one and the same, and that's why we can get labeled as such. But oftentimes, and particularly at the meatiest of moments, or when we need to do our jobs the best, they're not one and the same. And so players understand me. I'm transparent. I'm a player advocate. I'm all about what it is they need. And I recognize that it's not always necessarily what they want. And when those things differ, I certainly don't give a damn about what they want.
You got an opportunity to coach under some terrific coaches early in your career. And I think in terms of, Tony Dungy and John Gruden, you probably couldn't get more different in terms of approach and personality. What did you take from the early coaching that you did under head coaches that kind of shaped who you are right now?
I've always worked hard to learn. I think there's something to be learned from everybody. So I've certainly have done that. But those two guys that you mentioned in particular, the contrast in those guys really, really solidified in me that I need to be me. When you work with two dramatically different guys like that, it's like, okay, I better just be the best Mike Tomlin I can be. And sometimes you need that example, just the contrast of those two guys, and particularly, as you mentioned, at the early stages of my NFL career, it really made me comfortable just working to be the best that I could be and not try to be like Coach Dungy or be like Coach Gruden. And so I'm really appreciative and thankful for that, certainly.
You said earlier that you don't just stumble into being around this league for as long as Aaron Rodgers has. You don't just stumble into being in a head coaching position for as long as you have. And some of that has to do with the continuity that your organization has, but some of it has to do with what you've done. Is there something you can put your finger on in terms of what has produced that level of consistency? Because, sticking around in a job that you started when George W. Bush was president of the United States, that's a long time.
I don't necessarily think about the totality of it. And that's probably why we've been able to maintain it. A certain level of consistency, because we don't rest on what we've done in the past. We're urgent all the time. We're trying to win the world championship every year. Certainly, we've fallen short of that. But our agenda is the same. We're trying to be as competitive as we can be. We're trying to win every damn football game. We make decisions in that mindset. We don't make the simple complex. We try to field the very best team we can field week in and week out. We try to draft good men who happen to be good at football. We like long-term relationships. We value the growth and stability and the development of a young man into a seasoned player. I think it gives you things that you can't measure as a collective. When you got a Grizzly veteran like Cam Hayward, who was born and raised professionally here in Pittsburgh, raised by a generation before, like, Brett Kiesel and Aaron Smith, man, there's a depth to that that you can draw from in difficult times. And so there's a business model, man, that I think aids in the stability. But more than anything, aside from a business model perspective, I just think as an organization, we're urgent all the time.
Last couple of things. I'm going to draw from what people refer to as a Tomlinism. And you were quoted as saying, if a team doesn't face enough adversity early in the season, I create it. because nothing rallies a team like adversity. Has this team in 2025 seen enough early season adversity, or do you have to intervene?
I just think that, it's happened for us some. We've dealt with lack of player availability, and I don't run from that. I run to that. We've elevated somebody off our practice squad every week this year as an example of that. We're a new group, and we're kind of working to find cohesion, whether it's the young offensive linemen gaining, cohesion or us gaining cohesion with Aaron and Aaron getting comfortable with language and so forth. There's been a lot of things to make your hair stand up, to be quite honest with you, over the course of the first 6 games. And that's what you need. It brings the best and the worst out in us all. You might as well sort through all of that. And that's why I'm always open to it.
Did you really average 20 yards a catch as a senior?
What, in college?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a role, man, and I knew my role. My role was down the grass, and I didn't mind it. I enjoyed making the big plays.
I tell you what, I went back and looked. It's theoretically possible I broadcast a game that you played in. Did you play the game at Penn in 1992?
I did.
At Franklin Field.
At Franklin Field, it was kind of under renovation, maybe. Maybe a portion of it was not open.
I wish I kept my spotter boards, because I have a Mike Tomlin spotter board at some point or other in my life that I was calling a game that you were in. All right, so coaches remember everything. You remember anything about that game?
I remember I scored a long touchdown, probably about 60 yards, and I was giving it to some students that were right there by the end zone when I went in the end zone, and those students informed me that there was a flag on the play and it got called back. And so I thought I was giving it to them, and really they were giving it to me.
Thanks so much. Great catching up with you again. Really appreciate it. Good luck the rest of the way.
You know it. Thank you.